a young man named John received a parrot as a gift from his uncle. Unfortunately, the parrot had a bad attitude and an even worse vocabulary. Every word out of the bird's mouth was rude, obnoxious, and laced with profanity. His uncle told him to play soft music and say polite words consistently. That should clean up the bird's vocabulary. But nothing worked. Finally, John was fed up and yelled at the parrot. The parrot began to yell back. John shook the parrot, and the parrot got angrier and even more rude and cursed him the nastiest insults he'd ever heard. John, in desperation, grabbed the bird, threw him in the freezer right between the ice cream and the frozen turkey. The parrot squawked and flapped and screamed obscenities. And then suddenly, there was total quiet. Fearing that he might have hurt the bird, John quickly opened the door to the freezer. The parrot calmly stepped out onto John's arm and said, "I believe I may have offended you with my rude language and actions. I'm sincerely remorseful for my inappropriate transgressions, and I fully intend to do everything I can to correct my rude and unforgivable behavior." John was stunned. He was about to ask the parrot why was there such a dramatic change in his behavior. The little bird spoke up very softly. May I ask what the turkey did to you?" Years ago, I was camping out in the Santa Cruz Mountains at the Wilderness Torah Institute. We were all asked not to use our electronic devices or even our watches. Cell phone reception was spotty anyway, but as a rabbi and a father, I still check my messages every night. And sadly, while I was there that week, there were 2 deaths in the community. One was the beloved aunt of one of our congregants, and the other was the beloved chicken of my son and daughter. When Lila the chicken got sick, we kept her in a cage on our front porch so we could keep her safe and warm. And eventually we brought her inside our home and fed her nothing but yogurt and scrambled eggs. When she died, is that Lila laughing? Lila the chicken. When she died, they didn't know what to do at first. I was 3,000 miles away. Who will pick up the bird and dig the hole? Who will officiate the funeral? I advised them to lovingly place Lila into a small box and write a sweet message on the box and stack her in the freezer next to the Empire chicken if there's room. I promised we would do the funeral as soon as I got back home.
You didn't consult an Indian veterinarian.
It's probably not very hygienic to store them in there. Yes, I probably should have taken her to you. I promised we would do the funeral as soon as I got back home. Needless to say, Valerie was not such a fan of the post-mortem arrangements. But in my defense, it was the garage freezer. When I returned from my week away, we were all so happy to be together again that we thought, why spoil it with a sad funeral? Then the post-vacation tidal wave of work came back, and from that point on, there never seemed to be a good time to do the funeral. I understand better now the wisdom in Jewish law of requiring immediate burial. So finally, on the eve of Yom Kippur, Valerie was preparing chicken soup for the pre-fast meal. And she sent me out to the garage freezer to get a frozen chicken. And there was that Amazon shipping box with a big red heart and the words, Lila, a good chicken. And I thought, maybe we can just keep her cryogenically preserved to be brought back to life in some future messianic time. But no, we could not allow ourselves to go into Yom Kippur without giving a proper burial to a good chicken. After avoiding it for so long, because it was too sad, actually it was a relief to have that closure on the eve of Yom Kippur, which after all is about facing our discomfort head on and the joy and relief we get from having done that work. See what I did there? I connected the story to Yom Kippur. It was not easy. Okay. Some people think that Yom Kippur is all about punishing ourselves. No eating, no drinking, no sex. You can't be on your phone. What does this day want from me? Am I punishing myself for my sins? Rabbi Tzvi Hirschfeld of Pardes suggests a different approach. During the year when we're feeling emotional pain or loss or challenge or difficulty, we tend to cover it up. We numb it with food, with sex, with our phones, TV, chocolate, a glass of wine, whiskey, and since this is Burlington, a joint. Along comes Yom Kippur. Along comes Yom Kippur and says, no, don't numb it. Don't hide from it. Engage with it. Instead of numbing ourselves like we do on any given day of the year, the restrictions of Yom Kippur sensitize us to the subtle messages of our bodies and our hearts. The marathon of sitting, standing, singing, swaying, and the rigors of fasting forces us to face our vulnerability and our mortality. We're forced to confront the truth of our lives and return to the essence of who we are and why we're here. Now on this day, you'll notice I said Chag Sameach, a joyous festival, Good Yantif. And I've often wondered why we say Good Yantif on Yom Kippur. Isn't it supposed to be a sad day? Yantif is Yiddish for Yom Tov, or good day. So when we say Good Yantif, are we saying, may you have a good day? But why? What good is a holiday without wine and challah, without kugel or chocolate babka, no coffee, not even a glass of tea? This day is like the great anomaly in our heritage. A Jewish festival without a nash? How is that a festival? It wasn't until I spent my first Yom Kippur in Israel that I understood why some consider this to be the most wonderful time of the year. So let me take you 6,000 miles east of here for a moment. Yesterday in Israel, radio and TV stations were broadcasting popular Mizrahi, Middle Eastern Jewish melodies for the holiday and operatic renditions of the well-known Yom Kippur prayers. Even the digital display on the public buses had New Year's greetings. Almost every radio and TV channel features a physician prescribing a pre-fast measures to stave off headaches and ensure a tzom kal, an easy fast. Rabbis could be heard over the airways emphasizing that Yom Kippur is meant to be the most joyous holiday of the year because we get a new lease on life and a special opportunity to heal our relationship with others and with God. But why such joy? Oh, sorry, I skipped something. By 2:30 p.m., the airports and all public transportation grind to a halt, and eventually only emergency vehicles are allowed on the roads. Young men are walking back from the mikveh, the ritual bath, with wet, sloppy towels slung over their shoulders. 18 minutes before sundown, sirens blare through Jerusalem's streets like a great shofar, reminding people that it's time to light candles. But at that point, most people are already in shul for the pre-Yom Kippur Kol Nidre prayer. And it's so quiet. No planes, no cars, no trains, just the sound of prayer. And the joyous sounds of children who've been waiting all year to rule the empty streets on what is called Yom Ofanayim. Anybody know what Ofanayim means? Yeah? Bicycle. Yes, Israel's bicycle day. After the last strains of, so because all the streets are empty, the kids just take over the streets with their bicycles. After the last strains of the early evening fades, of the services fade, congregations spill out onto the blissfully wide, empty streets. Everybody's just walking in the street. Young and old march together, dressed in flowing white robes. There's so much laughter and joy in the air as old friends and neighbors bump into each other in the middle of the street and stop to bless each other, be sealed for a good year. The next day, of course, everyone looks hungry and thirsty, but there's still a sense of joy and holiness that increases throughout the morning and the afternoon. And when sunset arrives and the gates of prayer are closing for Ne'ilah, Israeli congregations complete the festival with ecstatic dancing and singing. But why such joy without the challah or the babka? Perhaps it's because when we are stripped down to our very essence, we find that there is joy in simply being alive, being present with your community, and being in the presence of the Creator. To really feel the truth of who and what we are. That is, we are vessels of God's light that is flowing into the world. And fasting clears us out, clears out the vessel so more light can flow. We pray for a year of more opportunities so that we can bring more of that light into the world. But why so many hours in community with all of these people, many of whom we don't even know? Why don't we just do this Vision Quest solo? I mean, we could more easily be fasting and praying at home, alone in our pajamas. The Machzor prayer book explains that today we stand together before God, ba'agudat achat, as a single spiritual unit, so that instead of confessing, I messed up, please forgive me, we sing it out loud together. We have messed up, we have transgressed, we have made mistakes, we are broken and in need of healing. And we do this out of a very deep instinct every year at this time. Even those who don't regularly find themselves in shul feel the need to be here today. Because we're all messy and human, and we need to be messy and human together on this day, just as Jews have been doing for thousands of years. In the Mishnah, the oral Torah, that was written down in 220 of the Common Era, there's a passage about what it was like to make pilgrimage to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem on the festival. Rabbi Sharon Brous developed a very powerful interpretation that helps us understand the healing power of being part of a sacred community, and she wrote a best-selling book about it called The Amen Effect, which I recommend. I'd like to share that with you today, her interpretation, but first let me set the scene. Picture it. If you were an Israelite in ancient Israel, you'd have traveled to the temple by foot from all corners of the land, including from the diaspora. You would save all your money for this experience of a lifetime. When you reached the gates of Jerusalem, you'd dip in the spring at the foot of the mountain, and then ascend with your animal or grain offering, accompanied by the sublime melodies of the great Levi orchestra and choir. You walk through this giant stone archway, turn to the right, and circle around the perimeter of the courtyard together with tens of thousands of people at a time, circumnavigating the courtyard around the central temple where the Ark of the Covenant was placed on a giant rock that was considered to be the cornerstone of creation and the place where Abraham bound his son Isaac to the altar and nearly sacrificed him. And when you're finished bringing your offering to the priests, you walk out the same place you walked in. And that's it. That's the ritual. That was the ritual unless you were someone whose heart was broken. The Mishnah describes the brokenhearted as someone who's in mourning, who's been excommunicated by their community, or a very sick person, or someone who has a very sick person in their home, or one who's lost something that's very precious to them. On the festivals, that person still had to go up to Jerusalem, even though in some cases they were not even permitted to bring an offering in their state of distress. They still had to ascend the stairs and walk through the arch, but the one whose heart was broken would turn to the left instead of turning to the right. And in doing so, they would walk against the current of tens of thousands of their people headed in the other direction. And every person who passed them would have to stop and ask them, as was the custom, Malach, which means, what happened to you? What happened? What's your story? And they would have to answer, my mother just died, or I'm really scared because someone I love is very sick, or I myself am very sick, or my life partner just left me and I feel so alone, I don't know how to make sense of my life anymore. Whatever was the source of their brokenness, they would have to say it out loud to a stranger. And then the stranger could not go on until they gave them a blessing. Until they said, as the Mishnah says, quote, may the one who dwells in this house comfort you in your loss. Or, may the one who dwells in this house have mercy upon your loved one and heal them. Or may the one who dwells in this house put it into your heart to listen to the words of your friends so that they may draw you near again. Whatever their situation, they would have received a blessing that the divine presence dwelling within the community would heal them, comfort them, shine upon them, lift them up, and grant them peace. And the brokenhearted person would answer, Amen, and keep walking, sure to encounter the next person's blessing, and the next, and the next. After making it all the way around, the brokenhearted would have seen and heard and been blessed so many times that for sure a sense of hope would find its way into their lives, opening a space for blessing. But what about those happy pilgrims who are holding their perfect offering, turning to the right, embarking on the spiritual journey of a lifetime at the holiest place in the holiest moment? When I imagine this scene, I can't help but think about Muslim friends who've told me and described their Hajj to Mecca as the most powerful and emotional experience of their lives. And so there you are in this ecstatic spiritual state, and there's this broken person who's stumbling towards you. The last thing you want to do is stop and get dragged down by a sad story. How often this year did we avoid visiting someone who was sick or in mourning because we worried that it would feel sad, awkward, or uncomfortable? What will I say? What if I say the wrong thing? I'm too busy. Believe it or not, I still face these obstacles almost every time that I go to visit someone, even though I've been tending the brokenhearted as a rabbi for over 13 years. But I found that as long as I manage to push past my fears and discomfort and just show up, I inevitably discover that my role has very little to do with saying the right thing. It's not about what I say. I can't make their pain go away, but I can sit and listen and help them carry the heaviness of their pain. I can make them feel less alone. And after all, isn't that the greatest gift that anyone can receive in this life? And so imagine you're that happy pilgrim on one of the highest days of your life, not wanting to spoil it with some Debbie Downer. And yet, after listening to and blessing the broken ones, you begin to realize that actually, this is your holy work. This is why you're here. It's not the prayers and the sacrifices. This encountering, attending to, blessing another person is how you come to know and encounter God. So now, with an even deeper sense of joy, you go around to the right and bless all the people in your path. And the same kind of thing happens when you're that broken person, because someday, after all, we all become that broken person. When it feels like you're walking in one direction and the rest of the world is walking the other way. The last thing you want to do is show up in a courtyard full of people, to be seen in this state. You want to stay home and curl up in your pajamas and hide from the world. Or at least just blend in and turn to the right with everyone else and pretend that you're okay. But you can't pretend, because you're not. You're not okay. You need to show up in this place where you know that you will be met and held with love and with grace. This is the secret sauce. This is the covenant of a holy community, the promise to each other that we will show up to this place to be together and we will lift each other up. This was true 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, and it's still true today. In fact, maybe it's even more important today when we're living life on screens under the influence of corporate algorithms which are not designed to help humanity thrive. Algorithms are computer formulas that never rest, that distort our sense of reality, our sense of self, that lead us toward extreme thinking about ourselves and others. We know the rule for social media platforms is, if it enrages, it engages. All in the service of increasing web traffic and increasing someone else's income. Humans are like all organic beings. We work best when we live and we work and we rest in the cycles that follow the natural patterns of nature and the sun. If we want to thrive in a world dominated by artificial light, by these dopamine machines we carry in our pockets, we need to do everything that we can to make space for the true light of shared humanity. It's not enough to follow @theChickenRabbi on Instagram and like my posts, although I encourage you to do that after the holiday. We need to actually come together face to face and to be seen and known by one another IRL. I'm not a millennial, so I'll just say in real life. We need Shabbos and Yontif, festivals, to sing together, become one unified voice together, to feel part of something much greater than ourselves. We also need to sit together in kibbutz at Kiddush over a bagel and whitefish schmear, or cream cheese if you prefer. Yeah, whitefish is a more acquired taste, but since many Jews are lactose intolerant and cream cheese is a disaster for them, some people have whitefish, and right, I forgot you guys are all fasting, so I'll stop talking about Kiddush and all the delicious fresh salads and the kugels, the kugels, and the lox, and the pickled herring. But seriously, I always crave pickled herring when I'm fasting. I don't know why. And that and orange soda. I don't know why. I don't drink that ever. Very thirsty. Okay. But seriously, I want you to know that Kiddush, when we sit down for Kiddush, it's not just the reward after making it through the service. Rather, eating together is a fundamental part of fulfilling the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbat. This year we gathered for Kiddush 33 times, each one sponsored in honor of a simcha or the memory of a loved one. President Jeff, Luis, and the kitchen crew, they are the holy priests. They're the priests of our temple, making our circles of true connection and healing possible. According to the Surgeon General, there is an alarming epidemic of loneliness in our country. When its effect is measured in terms of the impact on your health, research has shown that the impact on your heart and lungs is as bad as, if you're chronically lonely, it's as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But we didn't need a double-blind study to tell us that being lonely hurts us. We've known this for thousands of years. In fact, the very first chapters of the Torah, the Holy One sculpted Adam out of the earth, blew the breath of life into their nostrils. God said, Hine tov, behold, it is good. And it was good, until God realized, Lo tov yeh adam levado. It is not good for a person to be alone. One of my favorite teachers from rabbinical school, Rabbi Shai Held, recently wrote another book I recommend, entitled Judaism is About Love, Recovering the Heart of Jewish Life. Don't be threatened by the size of it. It is a doorstopper, but most of that is footnotes, so it's actually not as long as it looks. And in it, he challenges the common misconception that Judaism is primarily about law and justice, whereas Christianity is primarily about love. Unfortunately, this is a misconception that we have taken in from the dominant influence of Christian culture and how they've seen Judaism. But it's not true. He argues convincingly that love is at the center of Jewish theology, ethics, and practice, and that love is also fundamental to Jewish perspectives on justice, family, and our responsibilities to others. Judaism is based on the fact that human beings are designed for and evolved to live in the warm embrace of a community. For human beings, this love is as essential to our health as food and water and shelter. Sadly, in our time, the hardest thing to find is a moment of someone's truly focused attention and presence. Our name, Ohave Tzedek, means lovers of justice. And in Hebrew, we often shorten it to Oz, which in Hebrew means my strength, Oz. And what makes us strong, I love this, because what makes us strong, the essence of Oz, my strength, is that we witness and hold each other through our love, with love through our joy and through our pain. And that is one of the main goals and purposes of a Kehila Kadosha, a sacred community, to help us to shift our gaze away from our phones and our narrow patterns of thinking, to expand our hearts and minds by growing a village of support, love, and care. Before October 7, 2023, most Jewish communities in America were like those pilgrims circling right, with our offerings in hand, coming from a place of relative privilege, asking ourselves questions about what it means to hold our privilege responsibly, asking, how can we be good allies and show up with sensitivity for other communities who are oppressed? Asking, what does it mean to be Ohave Tzedek, lovers of justice? And though we may still be asking those questions, all of a sudden, after October 7th, 2023, it felt like our whole community was turning to the left. And now we were needing others to ask us, how are you? What are you experiencing as a Jewish person? How can I hold you in your pain? Sadly, many of us received the opposite from those outside of our community. At times it felt like we were ghosts, invisibly stumbling through the dark with our pain, our fear, and our trauma. I heard from many congregants who said they had closed themselves off from fully feeling and processing what happened. A few days ago, on October 7th, this room was packed with people from OZ, from Chabad, from Temple Sinai, and JCOGs. Through poetry, storytelling, and song, we were all able, on that terrible anniversary, to feel that we were not alone in our grief. We all felt a glimmer of hope and comfort in that. And then after our ceremony, we took that light with us, and we marched en masse to UVM, where the Jewish students were holding their own vigil. And when we showed up and flooded the room and surrounded the students, there were many more of us than there were students. It was very emotional and healing, not just for them, but also for us. And just as we need each other for support when we're in mourning, the same is true for when we celebrate. When someone else's child is born, or comes of age as a bar bat mitzvah, or they get married, Judaism insists, commands that we show up, even if we don't know them very well, because we have an important role to fulfill as the holy kvellers. We know kvelling. Kvelling is the Yiddish word. How do you describe kvelling? It's that warm and overflowing sense of joy and delight that we feel when we witness someone else achieving something great. We are kvelling. Last year, when we celebrated my son Aiden's bar mitzvah, we were so proud and so grateful. And although technically we could have celebrated at home with only the immediate family, we needed to be seen and celebrated and held by our community. There is so much truth to the old adage that a sorrow shared is a sorrow halved, and a joy shared is a joy multiplied. Today we will chant the 13 attributes of God's mercy over and over again. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun. Because these are the words that Moses heard from God on the first Yom Kippur, when the people were forgiven for the sin of worshiping the golden calf. Now at first Moses smashed the tablets, and God was so angry that he was ready to wipe them out completely and start over again with a different nation and place Moses as their leader. That's when Moses argued with God, saying, if you're going to do that, then count me out of this book, because those other people, they're going to make the same mistakes. You made a covenant with imperfect human beings, God. That means that you have to accept the fact that we will make mistakes, and you have to love us anyway. Eventually, God listens to Moses and agrees to love and forgive the people, knowing full well that they will do it again someday, as they do. And that's when God reveals to Moses the 13 attributes of divine mercy and makes a new set of tablets to reestablish the broken covenant. There's one phrase among the 13 attributes that I want to call attention to because it teaches us something very important about love and forgiveness. Noseh avon. Noseh avon, which is usually translated as God forgives iniquity. But noseh doesn't mean forgive. It actually means, literally it means to carry. That God will carry us along with our mistakes and imperfections. When we ask for forgiveness today, what are we really asking? We're not saying, please give me a second chance because now I'm completely fixed and I can guarantee I will never, ever do anything like that, even remotely like that again. Rather, we're saying, please love us for who we are, imperfect and broken, trying to do better, trying to grow straighter toward the light. Noseh avon. Carry our mistakes for us, please. It means that we're asking from a place of total humility that our loved ones and that God, please carry us lovingly, flaws and all. And just as the people of Israel placed the broken tablets of the Ten Commandments inside of the ark and carried them along with the whole tablets, as they made their way to the promised land, they carried them both together. So too in our sacred community, we carry each other's brokenness along with the wholeness. as we navigate whatever it is that this next year will bring. Because we're going to need to carry each other. We know that. These broken pieces, they're not extraneous. They're integral to our story, to who we are. They remind us why we're here. We get to carry each other through joy and pain so that the broken and the whole become one. Many times during the year, in our shame and guilt for being imperfect, we try to hide our mistakes. We're too ashamed to drag the past out into the light, to accept the fact that we're imperfect and incomplete. But now that we're sitting here among all the other imperfect, messy ones, who are doing the same work of fasting, praying, admitting, and confessing, now we can feel empowered, knowing that we are not the only messy ones. We can finally accept that it's our nature as human beings to be imperfect and incomplete, and that it's only in community that we begin to find a sense of wholeness, a sense of completion, a sense of atonement, a sense of at-one-ment. Today we catch a glimpse of the truth that shalom, or shlemut, wholeness, is impossible to achieve by ourselves alone, that we need each other to become more whole, to reach at-one-ment. Or as the great Paul David Hewson once said, one love, one blood, one life, you got to do what you should. One life with each other, sisters and brothers. Help me out. One life, but we're not the same. We got to carry each other, one. Shabbat shalom and good yantif.